Hello, this is Tuesday, August 12th, and my name is Sharon. I'll be reading the New Bedford Light. First story: New Bedford's growing Hispanic population lags in voter turnout. Article by Grace Ferguson, Tavishi Chattopadhyay, and Jacob Moskowitz. The influence of New Bedford's fastest growing population is easy to spot. You can find restaurants serving any tortilla-based dish you desire on Acushnet Avenue. More teachers and police officers in the city are speaking Spanish than ever before. The recent renovation of Dyers Field into a soccer complex reflects how children's interests have shifted from baseball to football. One place the changes haven't reached: the City Council chamber. 1 in every 4 New Bedford residents is Hispanic, but none of the city's 11 councilors are. Hispanic residents turn out to vote at lower rates than the rest of the city, casting less than 1 in every 10 votes during recent general elections, according to a New Bedford Light analysis of voter data in collaboration with Boston University Spark, Justice Media Collab. In New Bedford, Hispanics are a young population with many recent immigrants, which means a smaller share of the city's Hispanic population is eligible to vote compared to the city as a whole. While 65% of New Bedford residents are U.S. citizens over the age of 18, just 44% of the city's Hispanics fall into that group. But eligibility doesn't fully account for the gap. Even among Hispanics who were eligible to vote, the turnout was lower compared to the rest of the city during the last election. The Light's analysis of voter and census data indicates that about a third of New Bedford's eligible Hispanic voters cast a vote in the 2024 election, compared to about half of all eligible voters in the city. Representation does matter. To have elected officials who reflect your community and the needs you're seeing day to day, said Corinne Williams, Executive Director of the Community Economic Development Center, which works closely with the city's Spanish population. Ancestral distribution of New Bedford voters in 2024 presidential election. Other, count 22,460. Portuguese, count is 6,934. Hispanic, the count is 3,301, and Cabo Verdean, the count is 2,017. Williams said it's especially important to have that representation in government right now, as the Trump administration pursues an aggressive mass deportation strategy. Hispanic immigrants are at the center of a fundamental conflict over who should be allowed to live in the United States, and it's happening in the context of what some see as a decline in democracy. Low turnout is not a new phenomenon among New Bedford's Hispanic population, data shows, but Williams said the current political climate could layer on another chilling effect in the upcoming municipal election this fall. Hispanic residents live in fear that they or other people they know could be deported, she said, and that makes them less willing to get involved politically. In some ways, there's a sense of despair, she said, of throwing their hands up in the air. A contrast: Spanish and Portuguese speakers in city politics. When Guilherme Santiago was campaigning door-to-door for an at-large city council seat in 2023, she was alarmed to find that many Hispanic residents didn't know who their councilor was and didn't even know that they were registered to vote. Your kids go to school here. This is the street that you live on, she said in an interview this summer. I think there is a disconnect of them understanding that. Santiago, who was from Puerto Rico and runs a professional services business in New Bedford, had hoped to become the city's first Hispanic councilor. Some voters who spoke to the Light during the 2023 election said they had voted for Santiago specifically because they wanted more Hispanic representation on the council. She finished 9th in a field of 10 candidates. The share of ethnic groups in New Bedford, per 2020 U.S. Census Ancestry and Hispanic Latino data. The Portuguese is 32.5%, Cape Verdean 9.8%, Hispanic or Latino 23.5%, other is 34.3%. Between 2010 and 2020, the number of New Bedford residents who identify as Hispanic or Latino increased from around 16,000 to around 24,000, according to the U.S. Census. Yet this fast-growing population holds less political power than the city's Portuguese and Cabo Verdeans, who turn out to vote at higher rates. Most current city councilors come from these two ethnic groups. The Lights data analysis estimated that voters with Portuguese surnames cast about 18% of votes in the last city election in 2023, while voters with Hispanic surnames cast about 9% of votes. Cabo Verdeans cast about 6% of votes. The Hispanic community hasn't been in the city as long as the Portuguese and Cabo Verdeans, Santiago and Williams pointed out. This first generation is not as politically engaged because they're working hard, they're raising families, Williams said. It might take that next generation of their children to become more politically involved. The Hispanic community also isn't as culturally united or integrated with the rest of the city as Lusophone communities, Santiago said. That's partly because Hispanics come from many different countries and cultures, so they don't have as much of a shared identity, and partly because of language barriers. Santiago says the Hispanic community tends to keep to itself. Enormous community-wide events celebrate Lusophone culture. The Cape Verdean Recognition Parade stretches for miles, and the Portuguese Feast of the Blessed Sacrament attracts 100,000 people. There's no large-scale Hispanic equivalent to those gatherings, Santiago said. Where do we fit in all this? She said. I've never seen nobody raising a flag for the Hispanic community. The region's media landscape contributes to low Hispanic voter engagement, Williams and Santiago said. There aren't any local publications that cover New Bedford in Spanish on a daily basis. It's also too difficult to find accessible information on how to vote, especially for residents who primarily speak Spanish, they said. The Hispanic population doesn't know its political power yet, said City Council President Shane Burgo, but he thinks that will change as their population and investment in the city grow. Similar to the Portuguese and Cape Verdean community, they will have the same feeling of pride in New Bedford and wanting to effect the change by electing individuals that will help them effect the change that they want to see, he said. Santiago and Williams said a lack of representation in city government has caused Hispanic neighborhoods to be left behind. They're paying their fair share of taxes, but sometimes there's a disconnect between what they pay out and what they are receiving, Williams said. The city and state need to invest more in streetlights, garbage removal, and sidewalks in Hispanic neighborhoods like Acushnet Avenue, where a lack of services has been a long-standing issue, Williams said. Elected officials in New Bedford use active voter lists to focus their re-election campaigns on people who already vote, Santiago said. This campaigning practice has created a system where politicians rely on the same small voter pool to win elections, without taking the time to educate potential voters who haven't engaged in the past, she said. So maybe you see the same streets getting fixed, and you wonder why your street's not getting fixed, Santiago said. You're still paying taxes like everybody else, so perhaps it has something to do with the fact that you guys don't vote. Santiago and Williams said higher Hispanic voter turnout could help advocate for city services that better serve these areas. Hiring more Spanish-speaking staff in City Hall and holding community meetings in Spanish would also help, they said. Right now, the Community Economic Development Center does a lot of troubleshooting for Spanish-speaking residents when they encounter daily issues like parking tickets or sewer issues. There's a ton of city-based services that could have more attendance and more support for limited English speakers would go a long way, Williams said. Language and cultural barriers prevented some Hispanic residents from voting in the 2023 city election, Santiago said. She said she heard reports from people in her campaign that poll workers often didn't speak any language other than English and didn't understand that Hispanic voters can have multiple last names. According to Santiago, poll workers couldn't find some residents' registration records and turned them away. Santiago and Williams said there should be multilingual poll workers to prevent that from happening again. But Burgo, the city councilor, said it's already hard to find people willing to work the polls without a language requirement. Do we need more individuals that can speak multiple languages, he said? Yes, definitely. But the challenge becomes, who can we find that's willing to do that work? Manuel de Brito, the city's election commissioner, said part of the issue with last names is how the state gathers names for the voter rolls. De Brito explained voters are registered with one last name but might go by a different one. It's a challenge and it goes both ways, De Brito said. I think the state is doing a good job trying to differentiate and adding a lot more information to the voter list so that we can differentiate who's who. But that's definitely something that's always been a challenge, but that's not unique to New Bedford at all. It's up to the state to clean voter information in the voter registry to make it easier for people to vote, DeBrito said. The city's election commission has been working to get students, many of whom they say are multilingual, to work as poll workers. The pay is about $15 per hour. Officials hope that will help address the language and cultural barriers that cause some voters to be turned away. This fall, all city council seats are up for election, as well as 3 of 6 school committee seats and 1 assessor position. The deadline for candidates to file nomination papers is August 19th. Candidates need a minimum of 50 signatures to make the ballot, but often seek many more. The preliminary election will be held October 7. The general election is November 4. A full calendar explains this cycle's election process. Von Marie Moniz, the CEO of the South Coast Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, who was running for school committee, called for more Hispanic representation when she spoke to The Light earlier this summer. Santiago said she doesn't plan to run for city council again because of the amount of time it would take to mount a campaign and potentially hold office. But she hopes someone else from her community will. I would love to see somebody who is Hispanic and is from the community to try to take a city council seat, to try to represent us and to try to open that for the future, Santiago said. Our next story. State delays next offshore wind procurement until 2026. Officials cited delays in existing contract talks as well as uncertainty from the federal government pertaining to offshore wind permitting. Article by Chris Lisinski. With the current batch of offshore wind talks facing prolonged headwinds, Massachusetts officials will keep the subsequent development round paused until at least 2026. The State Department of Energy Resources said in a memo published Thursday that parties do not expect to submit a draft request for proposals for the 5th offshore wind procurement, which would contain a proposed timetable and method of solicitation for department review until next year at the earliest. Officials cited delays in existing contract talks as well as uncertainty from the federal government pertaining to offshore wind permitting and generality. Massachusetts remains committed to an all-of-the-above approach to energy, including offshore wind. But due to uncertainty surrounding federal permitting and tax credits in this moment, the state will not conduct an offshore wind procurement in 2025, said DOER spokesperson Lauren Diggin. As we work to lower energy bills and meet growing energy demand, we are bringing more energy into Massachusetts with the completion of Vineyard Wind and the New England Clean Energy Connect hydropower line, advancing new strong solar programs, speeding up permitting, and pushing for more transmission to connect us to affordable energy. We will also develop a more flexible offshore wind procurement schedule so ratepayers can secure the best deals. The move appears likely to further delay the eventual build-out of offshore wind power, an industry that state leaders have long targeted as vital to Massachusetts. Wind infrastructure has struggled to achieve liftoff here amid changing market conditions and, more recently, a shift in federal policy under President Donald Trump. Contract talks are ongoing for the 4th round of procurement under a state law sometimes known as Section 83C. Project developers selected by the state were supposed to complete those negotiations with utilities by August 14, 2024, but the deadline has been pushed back several times, most recently to December 31, 2025. Section 83C Round 4 contract negotiations need to conclude for such improvements to be fully understood and completely incorporated into the Round 5 procurement process, DOER attorneys Ben Dobbs and Colin Carroll wrote in a memo published Thursday. The Trump administration has moved to deprioritize clean power, including offshore wind. The Department of the Interior last month called for elevated review of decisions related to wind and solar energy facilities, a move it described as leveling the playing field for coal and natural gas. Comment policy. As an independent, nonpartisan news outlet, dedicated to diverse community voices. The New Bedford Light welcomes guest comments. Please be civil, courteous, and respectful. All comments are reviewed before posting. City residents turn out to protest proposed waste transfer station. Article by Brooke Kushwaha. More than 50 people gathered at the city's Board of Health hearing on a proposed waste transfer station in the North End Thursday evening, with about half of those taking to the microphone to speak out against the project. In the third of 4 public hearings on the proposal, members of the public shared their concerns around odor, noise pollution, increased traffic, air pollution, and vermin, as well as New Bedford's history of widespread environmental contamination. The Board of Health must decide by September 19 whether to approve the project or deny it based on its potential impacts to public health, safety, and the environment. The final Board of Health hearing to discuss a traffic study and mitigation for the waste transfer project is scheduled for Tuesday, August 26th at 6:30 p.m. at Casimir Pulaski Elementary School, 1097 Brayley Road. Brought forth by Parallel Products doing business at South Coast Renewables, LLC, the potential waste transfer station would handle 1,500 tons of solid waste per day, sourcing garbage from across the state and transferring it to rail cars to either be recycled or incinerated elsewhere. On a given day, about 200 trucks would move through the site, which abuts both a residential neighborhood and state-protected swampland. The project has been in the pipeline for nearly 3 years. Last month, the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection approved the project after an extended public comment period, sending the proposal to the Board of Health for review. If approved, the project would move on to the Planning Board and Conservation Commission. Earlier this week, South Coast Renewables, LLC, invited witnesses in the environmental and safety sphere to share the company's plan to mitigate health threats and nuisance. Those mitigation efforts included, but were not limited to, odor masking agents, water misters to capture dust and particles, rat traps, and a semi-automated fire suppression system. Residents pushed back against these plans Thursday night, arguing that the city did not have adequate means to ensure they would get implemented correctly, and taxpayers would end up footing the bill if something went wrong. In May, an existing waste transfer station on Sharman Avenue caught fire, causing a rat infestation in the surrounding neighborhoods. It's not a matter of will it catch fire, it's when, City Council candidate Jennifer Arruda said. City Councilor Linda Morad called the proposal obnoxious, pointing out the density of residential homes located within 1 mile of the proposed station. Do you honestly believe that there will be no effect to the quality of life of these residents? Morad asked the board. Morad later told Kim Kusan, vice president of the Parallel Products, to take that smirk off your face, end quote. Several residents complained that they felt shut out of the hearing process, only learning of this week's meeting by chance. The 50 people who attended Thursday's hearing represented a significant jump from the turnout at the past 2 meetings. No one at any of the 3 meetings this week used any of the available live translators. We were not properly notified, resident Jim Burnett said. Everyone I talked to, no one knew this was happening. Many speakers pointed to New Bedford's status as an environmental justice community with a long history of contamination and health hazards. Sullivan's Ledge and the New Bedford Harbor are both active Superfund sites in the area. Under Massachusetts state policy, developers must take additional steps to reach out to and engage with members of the public in environmental justice communities, including hosting accessible meetings and offering comprehensive translation services. Michael McHugh lives down the street from the proposed waste transfer station and remembers when the site once hosted a Polaroid processing plant. Speaking as a witness, McHugh described the sheets of dust that would collect on his father's car from the factory and the fumes that would waft through their open windows at night. We need to stop using New Bedford as a dumping ground, end quote, McHugh said. New group wants a safer Route 6. Article by Grace Ferguson and Eleonora Bianchi. On the morning of July 2nd, Gregory Crook McGuire was driving home to New Bedford across the New Bedford-Fairhaven Bridge. It was raining, humid, the kind of weather that makes the bridge metal grates dangerously slippery. He had just finished breakfast with a friend, one of his favorite things to do in a life rebuilt through faith and recovery after 7 years sober. He was heading back to meet a plumber. He changed lanes. The car lost control. A pickup truck hit him head-on. He died instantly. His sister, Tiffany Lapre, found out almost immediately. She was scrolling Facebook Marketplace when a live stream appeared, lights flashing on the bridge. Then she saw the car. It was a light blue convertible, and it was older. There's not a lot of them in the area, she said. McGuire was 41. After the accident, Lapre began hearing more stories of crashes along Route 6, especially near the New Bedford-Fairhaven Bridge. Just 2 days later, on July 4th, 16-year-old Raffaella Cristelli was hit by a car while walking nearby and severely injured. The next day, 17-year-old Maren Stackpole was killed in a crash a few miles down the road. It's certainly not a coincidence, said Will Gardner, a neighborhood development advocate from Fairhaven. There are features of this corridor that make it more dangerous. The holiday week crashes add to a tally of 109 accidents in which people were hurt on the bridge since 2005, including 6 in which people were killed, according to state transportation data. At least 49 fatal crashes have taken place on Route 6 between Westport and Wareham in that time, the data shows. For Lapre, it was devastating to realize how many others had been affected. My biggest question is, if this bridge has had this many accidents, and it's been 20-plus years since these things have been occurring, why has nothing been done, she said. Now a group of residents has embarked on a plan to prevent future tragedies on this road. About 30 people gathered around circular tables inside Fairhaven's Unitarian Memorial Church on Wednesday night for the first session of the Route 6 Working Group. The event was hosted by South Coast Places for People, a new local organization that hosts meetups centered on neighborhood development and planning. Readers interested in the Route 6 Working Group can get involved. I don't want people bleeding on my lawn, said Lila Cabral Bernard, who lives on Route 6 in Fairhaven. Quote, we should be able to cross the street and talk to our neighbors, end quote. Cabral Bernard said she has been seen a number of crashes and close calls on this road, enough to make her afraid to even try crossing it. Another woman from Fairhaven said she knows the Stackpole family, who lost their 17-year-old daughter. She said she was anxious about letting her 15-year-old son navigate Route 6 as he learns to drive. Gardner led the session. He said he had been thinking about launching a planning effort like this in the future, but the recent series of deadly crashes made him want to start it now. Many of you are coming here with specific people in your hearts and minds, he said. But Gardner warned the group to avoid mistakes he has seen other communities make after similar tragedies. Rattled residents cry out for specific, immediate measures like crosswalks or speed bumps that they think will help, but their solutions are impossible to implement, or they don't address the safety problem that caused the crashes in the first place. Instead, Gardner said he wanted this meeting to be the start of a long-term planning process to re-envision Route 6. The goal on Wednesday night was to determine which values residents wanted to see reflected in future redesigns. Over the course of the 2-hour session, residents mainly agreed on one thing. They valued safe infrastructure for people and pedestrians, even if it came at the cost of speed and convenience for drivers. They said they wanted to feel safe walking and biking in the area. They said Route 6 felt like an uncrossable barrier to anyone who wasn't inside a car, and they wanted that to change. It's not that they didn't appreciate the ability to quickly zip to Walmart. They just cared more about their experiences on foot. It's actually kind of radical what you guys are doing here, Gardner said, impressed by the group's willingness to challenge car culture. Route 6, or US 6, was approved in 1926 as a highway connecting Cape Cod with the South Coast and points west. But the road is overbuilt for the community's needs today, said Jonathan Gray, a bicycle and pedestrian planner for SRPEDD, the South Coast Regional Planning District. When roads are overbuilt, you get a lot of negative consequences, he said during a presentation to the group. Gray pointed to 2 SRPEDD studies that identified safety issues for drivers, cyclists, and pedestrians on stretches of Route 6 to the west and east of New Bedford. Though the 2020 and 2022 studies didn't identify the entire corridor as a crash hotspot, They noted that some areas had concerning clusters of crashes. The studies found that the road's current four-lane design is car-centric and encourages drivers to go fast. The speed limit ranges from 30 to 55 miles per hour. The corridor also has inconsistent, unsafe, and inaccessible infrastructure for pedestrians and cyclists, the authors found. The gist of it is Route 6 is too wide, Gray said. Gardner, during his part of the presentation, explained the difference between posted speed limits and design speed, or the speed that drivers feel they should be going based on cues from the environment around them. For example, drivers slow down on narrow streets with short blocks, he said, and they speed up on long, wide open roads. Route 6 is lined with businesses and homes, yet its design has much more in common with a highway than a business district or residential neighborhood, Gardner said. That lulls drivers into going faster than they should, he said. It does not feel comfortable to drive a safe speed on Route 6, he said. Solutions don't have to be expensive or extensive, Gray said. A little paint and some plastic posts can create a curb extension, which narrows the road in certain areas, encouraging drivers to slow down and look out. Flashing signals and targeted lighting can also help make crosswalks safer for pedestrians, he said. Gray said planners can try these small-scale solutions as temporary pilot or demo projects to see if they work in one area before funding a large-scale design overhaul. Attendees seemed to like this idea. Some said that recent roadwork narrowing parts of Route 6 down to 2 lanes was a pilot project in itself, and the expected traffic Armageddon never came to pass. Maybe safety and convenience aren't necessarily trade-offs, they wondered. The 2020 SRP-EDD spread study was the impetus for some projects currently underway aimed at improving pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure along certain stretches in Mattapoisett, Marion, and Wareham, according to Mass DOT spokesperson. With the replacement of the New Bedford-Fairhaven Bridge coming in the next few years, Gray said planners should be thinking about improving safety there. Construction is scheduled to start in 2028. The Route 6 working group plans to reconvene in September to finalize a value statement and conduct an observational walk along the corridor with transportation experts. New Bedford Mayor John Mitchell, in a written statement to the Light, agreed. He called for medians to be installed in the area, similar to other segments of Route 6 in Greater New Bedford. In any case, motorists should drive cautiously in the area of this bridge, his statement said. A New Bedford police officer on a motorcycle was giving out tickets on the bridge during Wednesday's meeting. Police have given out 336 tickets in that area this year as they tried to crack down on speeding, according to the city's public information officer. Speed limits on Route 6 on and near the bridge range from 30 to 40 miles per hour. New Bedford police reports show that crashes in the past year had a variety of causes, but wet weather seemed to contribute to at least 2 of them. In December, a driver lost control while braking in wet conditions and hit the guardrail. Another crash happened in April when a driver spun out on the wet grates, hitting another car and sending it sliding into a third car. 3 crashes were rear-end collisions when traffic was slowing or stopped. In one instance, a driver tried to make a U-turn from the right lane and hit a driver in the left lane. 4 other crashes appear to have been caused by drivers veering out of their lanes when they shouldn't have, including crossing the yellow line into oncoming traffic. Lapre, the sister of the driver killed on July 2nd, says she knows not every crash can be prevented, but she says there must be a way to make Route 6 safer. There should be no excuse for moving forward, she said. Quote, what can we do better so that way nobody else is impacted like we were, end quote. So I have been reading from the Bedford Light. My name is Sharon, and I hope you have a wonderful day.